By the second week of November, the smell behind the Marsh place had a name of its own in Cob Hollow, Illinois. People called it the pumpkin graveyard, and they said it the way you'd say something half funny and half true. Because behind Sadie Marsh's barn, in a pile that grew a little taller every fall, sat what was left of half the county's Halloween. Split, sunken, sweet rotten pumpkins, stacked 12 feet high in places, going soft and dark under the November frost. The smell of them, thick and cidery, on any afternoon the wind swung wrong. Sadie hadn't stolen them. She'd been paid to take them. Every October, 3 farm markets and the big pumpkin patch out on Route 9 unloaded their unsold stock on somebody, the way they did every year once Halloween passed and nobody wanted a jack-o'-lantern anymore. And for 2 years running, that somebody had been Sadie, driving a borrowed flatbed at a price that undercut the county's regular hauler by half. What she did with the pile once it landed behind her barn was where the town's imagination ran out. Some folks figured she just let it rot. A few, less kindly, wondered if the smell was ever going away at all. What Sadie Marsh was quietly working out behind that barn would end up doing something nobody in Cob Hollow believed a mountain of rotten pumpkins could do. It would feed her hogs through the hardest winter her small farm had ever faced, fill bottles with an oil so prized that chefs 2 states over would pay more for it, ounce for ounce, than she'd ever gotten for a hog at market. And it would do it all with a part of the pumpkin the whole county had been throwing straight in the compost for 100 years. If you love stories about people who find value where everyone else sees a mess, hit subscribe and join our farming family, and tell us in the comments where in the world you're watching from tonight. This one's worth staying for. Sadie Marsh was 26, and the 80 acres behind that pumpkin pile had been in her family for 3 generations. Her grandfather's hogs, her grandmother's kitchen garden, the kind of place that had never made anyone rich and had come closer than the family liked to admit to being sold off twice. Sadie had taken it over at 23, kept a modest herd of hogs and a market garden going, and spent most winters doing the particular arithmetic every small farmer knows by heart. How far the feed would stretch, how much the propane would run, how thin the margin could get before it stopped being a margin at all. The pumpkin hauling had started as nothing more than a way to close that gap. Cob Hollow sat in the heart of Illinois pumpkin country, the kind of place where every roadside stand and every school fundraiser sold pumpkins by the truckload every October, and every November, without fail, produced a mountain of what nobody wanted anymore. The county's regular hauler, a man named Dale Pruitt, had run that route for 15 years, charging the markets a flat fee to haul the leftovers to the landfill. Sadie offered to do it for half his price and feed the pumpkins straight to her hogs instead. Pumpkin flesh being, as any old-timer could have told her, perfectly good hog feed, full of water and fiber that stretched a feed bill further than anyone in town gave it credit for. The trouble was volume. Her hogs could eat through a fair amount of pumpkin, but nowhere close to what 3 markets and a 9-acre patch produced in a single season. And by the 2nd November, the overflow had become the mountain behind her barn that Cob Hollow had started calling the pumpkin graveyard. Not always kindly. Dale Pruitt, who'd lost half his fall contract to a 26-year-old with a borrowed flatbed, did not take the loss quietly. When the pile behind Sadie's barn grew tall enough to see from the county road, he filed a complaint with the county about unpermitted waste storage, and within a week, a code inspector was standing in Sadie's yard with a clipboard and a citation deadline. 30 days to clear the site, or bring it into compliance, or face a fine that would have eaten a season's profit twice over. Sadie stood in that yard staring at a pile of pumpkins 12 feet high and 30 days on a clock, with no idea how a person cleared that much rot in a month, let alone turned it into something worth the trouble. It was somewhere in that stretch of sleepless nights that she remembered a name from her grandmother's old address book, a woman named Greta, who'd lived alone at the edge of town for as long as anyone could remember, and who Sadie's grandmother used to visit every autumn with a basket of the ugliest pumpkins from her own patch. Greta was 81, the granddaughter of Austrian immigrants who'd settled in Illinois generations back, and she had never, in all that time, stopped doing the one thing her own grandmother taught her in a cellar half a world away: pressing pumpkin seeds into oil, the old way, the way her family had done it in the hills of Styria before they ever set foot in America. Nobody in Cob Hollow had ever quite understood what she did with the seeds she asked neighbors to save her every fall. Most people who knew her at all just called her the Pumpkin Lady and left it there. Sadie knocked on her door with a photograph of the Citation in her hand. Greta looked at it for a long moment, then looked at Sadie and said, "You've got 30 days and a mountain of pumpkins, and you've been feeding your hogs the one part that was never worth anything to a hog at all." She meant the seeds. Every pumpkin Sadie had fed whole to her herd all season had gone down a hog's throat, seeds and all. The same seeds that, cleaned, dried, and pressed the right way, become a dark, nutty, almost black-green oil, so prized in parts of Europe that it carries legal protection the way champagne does, selling for far more per ounce than almost any cooking oil on a grocery shelf. "Don't waste the seed, child," Greta told her, turning a handful over in her palm. "That's where all the gold's been hiding the whole time." Could an old woman the whole town barely noticed actually hold the answer to a problem a county citation had given her 30 days to solve? Sadie didn't know. But she drove home that afternoon with a stack of borrowed drying screens and a phone number for a machine shop 2 counties over that still repaired old seed presses. What Greta was teaching her mattered because of the seed itself. Pumpkin seed oil isn't pressed from a fryer-style refined process. It starts with seeds that have to be scraped clean of every last string of pulp, because any pulp left behind rots before the seed ever dries. The clean seeds are dried slowly, then roasted at a precise temperature that coaxes out the oil's deep color and nutty flavor without scorching it, and only then pressed, traditionally in a stone or screw press, into an oil so dense with flavor that a single spoonful, drizzled raw over a plate, is meant to be tasted, not cooked. Get any one of those steps wrong, and the whole batch is worthless. Sadie found that out 3 separate ways before she found out how to do it right. Her first batch, she never even got as far as pressing. In her hurry against the 30-day clock, she pulled seeds straight from the rotting pile and spread them out to dry with pulp still clinging to half of them. Within a week, the whole tray had gone soft and gray with mold, a total loss before it had ever really begun. If you've ever rushed something out of pure desperation and paid for it, you already know exactly how Sadie felt standing over that ruined tray. Drop a comment and tell us about a lesson you learned the expensive way. And if this story's already got you, go ahead and subscribe now, because it's about to turn. Batch 2. She cleaned the seeds properly this time, patient about it, scraping every string of pulp away by hand. But she roasted them hot and fast, trying to save time she didn't have, and pulled a tray of seeds so scorched the oil that finally came off them tasted burnt and bitter, nothing at all like the deep, nutty oil Greta had let her taste from her own cellar. A second batch, gone. Batch 3 she roasted with more care, low and slow, the way Greta told her a dozen times, and pressed it while the seeds still held a trace too much moisture, and the oil that came out was cloudy, and within days had started to smell faintly rancid, spoiled before she'd even gotten a bottle to market. 3 failures, and the county's 30 days were disappearing faster than she could afford. Somewhere around the 4th batch, Sadie stopped guessing and started following Greta's process exactly. No shortcuts, the way the old woman had clearly done it 10,000 times without ever writing a word of it down. Clean every seed of pulp before it dries. Dry it slow, out of direct sun, for the better part of a week. Roast it low, watching the color instead of the clock. Press it only once it's bone dry, not a moment before. What came off the press that time was a thick, dark, almost black-green oil that smelled like toasted nuts and tasted, when Sadie finally worked up the nerve to try a spoonful straight, like nothing she'd ever bought off a store shelf in her life. She filled her hogs' troughs with the leftover pumpkin flesh, exactly as she always had, and bottled the oil in small glass jars with a plain label, and drove the first case of it, along with a full accounting of her cleanup plan, straight to the county office before her 30 days ran out. The inspector who'd written the original citation walked the property, found the pile reduced to a working, actively processed operation instead of an abandoned dump, and closed the file without a fine. Dale Pruitt never got his hauling contract back. But the following October, it was Dale who called Sadie first, offering to bring her the overflow himself instead of hauling it to the landfill, because the landfill charged him a tipping fee, and Sadie, by then, was paying him for the delivery. A chef in Chicago found Sadie's oil at a specialty market that winter and called the number on the label asking how many bottles she could send a month. She didn't have an answer yet. By spring, she did. A proper drying shed, a real press instead of a borrowed one, and a standing order from 3 restaurants and a gourmet grocer that couldn't keep her bottles on the shelf. The hog operation, still running on free pumpkin flesh every fall, turned its best margin in years. And the pile behind the barn that Cob Hollow used to call the graveyard became, within 2 seasons, the busiest working corner of the whole farm. Greta Voss lived to see the first case ship out. She came by most Sunday afternoons that year, sat at Sadie's kitchen table with a cup of coffee, and watched the operation grow without ever once saying she'd told her so. The nearest she came to it was one gray afternoon in late autumn, watching Sadie load bottled oil into a delivery crate bound for the city. "My grandmother pressed oil in a cellar nobody in this country ever understood," Greta said, turning a jar slowly to watch the light move through it. "Took 80 years and a mountain of rotten pumpkins for anybody around here to finally taste what she was talking about. Don't waste the seed, child. That's where the gold's been hiding all along." Somewhere, right now, on some farm nobody's thinking twice about, there's a pile of something everybody's already decided is nothing but a mess, good for nothing, worth less than the trouble of hauling it away. Most people will keep doing exactly what's always been done with it. Every so often, somebody looks a little closer at the one part everyone else already threw away and asks what it might actually be worth. If this story reminded you that the ugliest problem on the place can turn out to be the most valuable thing you own, subscribe for more true-to-life stories from the farm. Tell us in the comments about a mess in your own life that turned out to be worth more than you ever guessed. Share it with somebody who needs that reminder today. And as always, let us know where in the world you're watching from. We'll be here, same as always, telling the stories the land remembers.